Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. From the Jethro's Barbecue remote studio. Not remote, we're we rarely do remotes. Most of our guests are in-house, but there's a reason our guest is not in-house today. Ian Roberts, Superintendent Ian Roberts, former Superintendent Ian Roberts of the Des Moines Public School District, was obviously arrested by ICE. And since that time, a lot of stuff, we'll just call it stuff, has come out about him. Grand theft auto, gun charges, drug trafficking. He was deported under the Biden administration, restraining orders, married and divorced a few times, and apparently some ongoing child support lawsuits. So what's interesting about this is the person doing the best coverage of this is a citizen journalist that outdid our local media from California. Laura Powell, a civil rights attorney, joins us today. Laura, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Briefly, everybody, Jethro's Barbecue is the sponsor. This is the Jethro's Barbecue studio. We love Jethro's Barbecue. Go to iowapodcast.com, scroll to the top, click the banner, and they're going to give you a $100 gift card for free if you buy a $30 gift card, which is awesome. Sorry, if you buy a $100 gift card, they'll give you a $31 for free. Bruce would kill me if I said that, so just to be clear. Laura, you're a constitutional rights, government accountability advocate, a founder for Californians for Good Governance, which is a nonpartisan advocacy group to combat government overreach. Two questions. Why, local media at first was kind of suspicious of your reporting, and then they went to just ripping off your local reporting. So how is it that someone from California is doing a better job than we are at this story?
Well, that's a good question of kind of why is the media failing so much? But the initial stuff was very easy to find. This is just Google searches, that started raising red flags and had me looking around a little more and finding contradictions in his record, all just through regular Google searches. I mean, this also raises questions, which is really my main point is why didn't the school board vet him? Why didn't they do a Google search before hiring him for such an important position? I mean, there's obviously a lot of these details we didn't have at the beginning and, wouldn't have been easy to find about the details that ICE has released about his criminal record. But just his resume on its face really raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the fact that you found a lot of this with just really normal Google searches. And so let me go through a few ticks here, but JG Consulting, apparently he went through a process of vetting there. He's obviously, I would assume, being paid via a social security number. And he previously struggled in his last superintendent job to actually provide citizenship or truthful credentials. This is all documented. This is the stuff you found. And then, of course, you mentioned this was a simple Google search. How is that possible? How is that even possible?
So is the question, how does the board look the other way and doesn't bother to try? I mean, you can guess. I mean, they also outsource this, right?
Yeah.
So this is they paid, I forget how much. I think it was maybe 30,000.
50 something, maybe. Yeah, I can't remember.
And I think part of that is so that they don't have the responsibility and they are, saying, well, we paid them to, do these background checks. And then they paid this third party, the right. JG Consulting paid Baker Eubanks to do the background check. What was the background check supposed to cover, though? I think it's credible what Baker Eubanks, I saw say, was that this was just to cover criminal stuff. They weren't supposed to go look into his degrees and his immigration status. And that sounds like it was in the board. I don't know, JG's responsibility on finding out whether he had received the degrees he claimed, but nobody bothered to investigate that. But his resume, the resume he submitted to the board that has come out, although they said there was another version, but they somehow don't have it. It's not credible on its face. It shows that he has 2 doctorates in the same subject. Now, why would somebody who already had a doctorate from Morgan State University go out and get a second doctorate from an online school. I mean, obviously, this is not accurate. I mean, he even had a dissertation name down for Morgan State, and so why wouldn't that raise any questions? And I think they didn't want to ask any questions. He fit the bill of what they wanted their principal to look like. And his story was appealing to them, of this, inspirational story of being an immigrant and an Olympic athlete and highly educated. And so they wanted to believe that.
So, I mean, it might be, well, okay, so two questions there. Are you suggesting, and obviously you don't have insider information, you've been Googling, researching just like a journalist would, but is it even possible the board didn't know any of this? Just based on your research, I know you don't have insider access, maybe you do. If you do, let us know. But is it even possible the board, and I should point out the Iowa Board of Educational Examiners also gave him a license. So is it even possible he went through all this process and someone didn't know?
I think it's possible that they were completely ignorant, that they never looked at his resume. They never asked any questions. They just said, oh, we've got this guy, here's the guy. And, this was all a closed door process. The recruiting process, they said, we're only going to announce the one finalist. We're not going to say who's in the running along the way. There's actually more I haven't had time to write up that I've found about how the recruiting process went. And it really seemed like it was being pushed by like an outside group, that they were trying to manipulate the board into going a certain direction. But, the board's responsibility is to ask questions before it's not to rubber stamp what a consultant tells them to do. They're responsible for their decisions. They're responsible for, at least looking into this basic facts about his life, looking at his resume. One point I wanted to make is I'm not sure, the board keeps trying to point fingers, or at least, Jackie Norris, speaking as the chair of the board, points fingers elsewhere and points at the state who gave him the license. I'm not sure what the licensing is supposed to check. So it's not clear whether they dropped the ball. They're not supposed to, they're not there to see that he's legal to work in the US, for example. I don't think that's part of their role. I think they're checking to make sure he has the basic credentials he needed to qualify for a license, which I think at that point he did, because he did get the online doctorate, which I think, qualifies him under Iowa law to be a superintendent.
So you do say something really interesting there. And by the way, for everybody listening, we have reached out to Jackie. We've reached out to the school board. We've reached out to some admin at the building. We've reached out to the Iowa Department of Education Director Mackenzie Snow's office. They're the only one so far who's declined. Everybody else has not returned our requests yet. So, of course, we're going outside the state to get information. But you mentioned an outside group, and I'm assuming you're not talking about JG Consulting. So there's JG Consulting, who did the recruitment process. There's the board, who have their own checks and balances. I should point out the board is part-time, so they do offload some of this stuff to third parties because they're not full-time. Who is this outside group? Do you know anything about them, or how did you identify this group?
Yeah, so this is something I've been working to piece together and haven't talked to anybody about yet. But there's this nonprofit, the Council for Great City Schools, that Des Moines Public Schools is a member. They pay them, I think it's $40,000 a year for this membership. And when I discovered some videos where they, in the recruiting, in the preliminary stages of the hiring process, a representative from that group was really controlling the meeting and really, so I'm trying to figure out how influential this person was in bringing in Ian Roberts as the choice, but he definitely was pushing strongly, saying that the demographics of the interim superintendent were not adequate, were not good. He's sort of slightly veiled, but there was a lot of discussion clearly that it was supposed to be a Black candidate. That was
really.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking through all the stuff to see how explicit they are, but it's pretty explicit. He talks about how people want to see somebody who looks like them, which I guess means Black. Talks a lot about diversity and urban. The word urban comes up a lot. which, is often used as sort of a euphemism for Black in, various
Interesting.
contexts. So I think it was really clear that this was that was a factor.
Huh.
And,
So
now we have the Department of Justice investigating Des Moines for
correct.
civil rights violations for having pretty explicit race-based hiring practices.
So it's almost like those criteria were at the top of the list. And once they checked those off, everything else kind of didn't matter as much anymore. This is interesting about this third-party group because there have been suggestions online. I have yet to see concrete evidence of it just because there's so much coming out at such a rapid pace. But there have been suggestions that he was essentially handpicked before the JG consulting process even happened so that they had some type of cover to say we went through the process. I don't know if that's true, but this is circulating online a lot. Have you seen anything to indicate that? Outside of this outside group, I guess, is kind of an indication that maybe that happened.
It feels that way. It feels because they weren't talking, they weren't going to publicize any other candidates that were finalists. Also people point out where are the other candidates? Like if they, knew there were finalists who got interviewed and this scandal breaks, you'd think that maybe they'd be, identifying themselves.
Oh, that's true. Well, if any candidates are listening to this, you're free to reach out to me. We're easy to find, howdy@iowapodcast.com. So it might be just a really, really quick reset. It might be good for some people who are getting caught up on this story. I was going to start out this interview. We scheduled this, I think, Friday. I was going to ask, what's fake so far? It might be a shorter list to discuss what's actually real, because there's a fake doctorate, maybe multiple fake degrees. You have 3 different birthdays you found for Ian Roberts in various locations. And also there's this question of military service. So is any of this real?
Yeah, some of it's real, and it's actually kind of the more interesting parts that people are skeptical of, like being in the Olympics, the military service. Those things are real. The guy, he's not what he says he is. He's a con man, but he does have some talents. He could have made something in life if he had done it the honest way,
Sure.
So, the birth date is 1970, December 18th, 1970. That's on every official document over and over. It looks like he was lying about his age, partially for vanity. He was always making himself younger. He set up his own Wikipedia page. I'm all but certain. And he put down 1978 when he set this up a few years back. And he did it on his birthday, on his 44th birthday. He celebrated by creating a Wikipedia page for himself that said he was 36. But let's see, he did go to officer candidate school and became a police officer in Guyana. He wrote about that experience. I don't know, this is his point of view, but I'm inclined to believe it because it doesn't make him look good. He said he was in these groups that were known as death squads in Guyana when he was a police officer. There was a lot of rising crime at that time, and they dealt with it by having police who would kill people instead of arresting them. And that was, a human rights issue that people were talking about into the late 90s. At that point, he would have been gone.
And he writes about this in his own book?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he tries to say that he kind of would push back when there was signs that the killing was not what the police were saying, so he was trying to say that, but he talks about himself as a trained assassin. I don't know, maybe he's kind of trying to make himself sound tough, but he certainly, this is the background he came from. And it's not clear what happened to him in the mid 90s. There's this 96, he had an arrest, which didn't result in a conviction. That was, I guess, the gun related at the airport in New York.
Oh, there's another gun related thing.
Well, yeah, there's more than one gun related thing.
Okay.
That was, that was something that didn't result. This has just more recently come out from DHS. Didn't result in a conviction as far as what their report is. But it sounds like he maybe came to the country, got into some trouble, left again, and then came back as a student. It's a little hazy.
Wow.
Oh, he also, I don't know NCAA rules, but some people have suggested that perhaps the line about his age related to some rules. So he did run track. He did go to the Olympics. I keep reminding people, though, that going to the Olympics for Guyana is not the same kind of level of competition as going for the US, but it's still an accomplishment. He was an accomplished track runner in college, and he was also like 30, almost, well, actually, I guess he was 29 when he went to the Olympics, and hadn't been running track for a lot of years. So he clearly has a gift there. He apparently does have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctorate from an online university, and has done a few other programs, educational programs, like a executive master's in leadership, which was like a part-time evening program for DC principals that he did at Georgetown. And he did, I believe, work the jobs he's claimed to. Although how much he got those jobs through deceit is unclear, because he's been calling himself doctor for a very long time, since he pretended to have his doctorate from 2007 that he didn't get. He got his doctorate in 2021, but he called himself doctor, and his employer called him doctor in some public posts. So it may be when he worked for DC schools that he had lied to them about his credentials as well.
It almost reminds me a little bit of the Frank Abagnale story that was made popular by Catch Me If You Can. You know what I mean? And so, I do want to point out that maybe there is a redemption story in the future for Ian Roberts, but it's still wrong. And here's what's crazy to me is, as I talk to local sources, I see this desperate attempt to try to spin this as a positive. I saw someone comparing him to the Music Man and saying, sure, it was all a lie, but he really helped people. And I heard someone else pretty high up in local government say, it's just a darn shame they did this to him because he was such a great role model. And I'm like, none of these things are true. The guy lied to your face. The guy wasn't a role model. He was lying to everybody. Have you seen, I have to ask, because of these reactions are odd. It's a person who had a firearm in his district-assigned vehicle. It's a person who we know broke laws and broke rules. Have you seen backlash to simply reporting this at all?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think what you're seeing there is the old thing about it's easier to con somebody than to convince them that they've been conned.
Oh, sure.
They want to believe. They want to believe. I mean, they don't want to believe they were foolish, and they also want to believe that he is who he's been pretending to be.
Sure.
Because they like this story. They like the story of the guy who made it, and is an inspirational figure. Yeah, but I'm with you. This is how I got sucked into this case in the first place, is I don't like liars. And so once I had a liar in my sights, I wanted to see where this went. It bothers me. He maybe could have gotten to where he is the honest way.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, I don't know if this is a law thing, but is this a normal thing where when people apply for jobs or people just kind of take them at their word? They just don't want to do the background. They don't want to do the research. If they see the ideal candidate and they like them, they just kind of say, well, is this kind of how the industry works? Like, people lie about, I mean, you're a lawyer, but people lie about pretty much everything, and they're rarely caught, or I should say they're not caught immediately because we don't really look into people's backgrounds and double check if they're lying to us or not.
Yeah, it's not my area of law, and I don't employment law, and I don't have a lot of experience with that, but it does kind of surprise me for something this high level. What were they spending all this money on the consulting firm for if it wasn't to do that? But I think there is something in our culture, though, right, that we kind of, if people can talk the talk, Americans often are willing to elevate somebody who fits the picture and not worry so much about their background. But yeah, I really question what it is that was so inspirational about him, other than his life story, which was a lie. What is the inspirational part? What was he doing that was so wonderful? It sounds like he was pretty hands-on. He'd go talk to the kids. That's nice, but I don't know that that's the most important thing you need out of a superintendent. It's, a pretty complex job with a lot of different kinds of, people you have to deal with, all the way up, the government level. So I'm not sure that talking to the kids is really the thing that we need the most. You heard a lot about his image. You can tell on social media, he has a lot of professional shots, and he had this, very flamboyant look.
He has a lot of pro shots. As I'm researching this, I'm like, my word, it's like it's like a modeling agency came and like fitted him with like it's. I mean,
Well,
you got
the
to give the
clothes
guy some credit.
clothes were a little too fitted, I'd say.
You got to give the guy credit for like. I mean, maybe he should have gone in a career like a modeling or fashion career because the guy's he's got some taste. You got to give him credit for that. You had also talked about there's this odd connection. And I'm just saying odd. I'm not saying nefarious. I'm not saying bad here. I want to be very clear. But there is some odd connection with Jackie Norris. And, of course, she was Michelle Obama's chief of staff, I believe. But they like knew him ahead of time. Like they may have he came to some event that Michelle Obama was speaking at, and they had a discussion of some kind. I think this was you, right? Can you explain what that is?
I don't know how much to make of this. I mentioned it because, and that was kind of early on when I wasn't sure where this was going to go because I was kind of posting stuff on X as I was finding it. And he was a principal at a DC school, and Michelle Obama came to the graduation to speak. And he wrote about this in one of his self-published books. So they would have crossed paths there. So, that just started I just marked that, knowing that Jackie Norris had that connection. A lot of people are speculating that this goes bigger, that somehow, the Obamas are involved and there's people who protected him. I don't have any reason to think that, but, you do notice that some people, Jackie Norris, when I start looking into her, she was described by the New York Times as a Democratic operative, and then her husband goes, this is in 2008 when she got the job with Michelle Obama, and that her husband goes back as a Democratic operative even further than that. So just to realize that some of the people, though, involved in bringing somebody like this to power are very well connected in high places, and that, I'm not sure what the relevance is. I don't have anything more than that. And I don't know that we ever would find out anything more if there was something more. And also when you look at, when I'm going back to when he was hired a couple of years ago, it seems like his biggest advocate was, I'm going to forget her name, the board chair at the time, who's since passed, Therese Caldwell.
Yes, Therese Caldwell Jackson. Is that right?
I'm not sure.
Boy,
Yeah,
I'm blanking
Johnson.
on the name right now.
Yeah, so
Johnson, is it Johnson?
I don't know. I don't.
We'll look it up and put it in the show notes.
Yeah. So she was chair at the time, and I started to suspect that maybe she was the person who brought him in. I was looking for connections that could have existed before. I was trying to figure out what the link was, where they got his name from, because I don't believe he just saw the job announcement. I mean, he could have, but I don't think he just got it that way. He said in an interview that a friend told him about the job.
Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating. And what I don't understand, well, so I'll go back a little bit because I want to make sure to harp on this a little bit. Once he's paid, and this is probably a quick answer. Once he's paid, don't people require a social security number? Like, wouldn't that set off a lot of red flags? I think you mentioned something like that. Like, if you're trying to pay someone through the legal processes, and that should set off red flags, right? And he was also registered to vote in Maryland, apparently, which is also impossible. But what's the payment thing? Like, that didn't raise any red flags, and should it have?
So he was authorized to work at some points in time.
Okay.
And I think from what they released, and this is just my guess based on the dates. So when he got married the second time in 2017, he then applied to get a green card and was denied twice.
Yeah.
And that he got work authorization for about a year twice. And I'm assuming, not being an immigration lawyer, but I believe this makes sense, that maybe that was a temporary 1 year work authorization they would give him while his application was pending as the spouse of a U.S. citizen. I mean, immigration law is complicated. And I haven't talked too much about the immigration stuff because we didn't have all the facts. We've gotten a bit more. But
right.
Well, I will say immigration law is complicated. I've heard Jackie Norris say many times that citizenship is complicated. I wouldn't say that citizenship is so complicated. It's much more of a black and white thing. And he reportedly told the board he was a citizen. There's no way he could have thought he had gone through the naturalization process. In theory, there could be stuff like he didn't realize his work authorization had expired, something like that. That you could say that sounds plausible. It's not plausible he thought he had become a U.S. citizen.
That's a great point. Yeah, because he intentionally said on official forms, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that he was a U.S. citizen, and he has never been a U.S. citizen at any point in his life.
Yeah, that's what the board has reported, that they were told he was a U.S. citizen. I don't think we've seen any documentation. But so he would have had a Social Security number from the times he was authorized to work. And I can't remember, actually. I think he did have some work authorization related to his student visa back around 2000. So I'm assuming he was just still using that number. I don't know if it would have had I think it should have had a note that it wasn't unlimited, that it was limited to his DHS authorization. So it's possible maybe there was an error made and that wasn't on there. Maybe he got a fake one, but maybe was using the same number that he had been given, but got rid of the notation that said his ability to work was limited. So I don't know all those details, but yeah, it's just, I guess they saw a Social Security number and didn't ask any other questions. And I probably also, you can imagine they'd say, well, gee, he worked at this other place, right? This is the thing about being a con man. Once you con one person, then you kind of have them as a reference. They're like, he worked all these other places. Right. How could this be true? Just as we all thought when we saw the headline, right? How could he get to this point and not have been caught by anybody?
Absolutely. Are there any unanswered questions? Probably final question, and I do, just for those watching, our internet is struggling a little bit for some reason right now. So if it's chopping in and out, it's not you, it's us. But are there any unanswered questions that you're still chasing down, or is this pretty much a closed book on your end?
Well, unfortunately, there is still stuff I want to chase down. I am still looking at this connection of who brought him in initially. There's also an incident that I would like to get more information on in Kansas City, where he reportedly, not sure how much I can reveal because my source has asked me not to reveal some of the personal stuff, but there was an incident that led to a protective order in 2023 against Ian Roberts. So I want to get the full story on that, and yeah. Oh, there's also, the board has his boss at this other place. The board had apparently hired her at some point, the Des Moines School Board. And I also have heard him looking for...
Is this Nicole Price?
Yes, Nicole Price. At some point she was involved. She lists them as a client, and 3 other of his former employers she lists as clients. And there's also, I think there may be more where she benefited financially from his position at the Des Moines School Board that I'm looking at.
So where Ian Roberts goes, this Nicole Price tends to get contracts.
Apparently, according to her website.
Interesting.
So I'm trying to track that down too. I mean, this is the kind of thing, of course, it's very strange. I'm looking at Des Moines when I'm here in California, but by all accounts, this is just a very interesting story in this case because of the character involved and the way it came to light. But these kinds of things are going on across the country.
Perhaps soon you'll be the founder of Americans for Good Governance, because now that Iowa is or at least it used to be, the political epicenter of the country and therefore the world. So maybe you need to expand the horizons to Iowa. I mean, you already kind of did. So Laura, thank you so much for doing the hard work for some of us here in Iowa. I will bestow upon you the title of honorary Iowan, so you can put that on your website now. Laura Powell, civil rights attorney, constitutional rights, government accountability advocate, and the founder of Californians for Good Governance. Laura, thank you so much for your time. What's the website and the X handle so people can reach out to you and follow what you're doing?
Yeah, best way to find me is on X at Laura Powell Esquire, Laura Powell ESQ.
And we will post all of that in the show notes. Laura, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Hey everyone, Justin here. Death is not the easiest topic to discuss. It's a hard one. It's pretty heavy. But I want you to think about this. What were to happen if you died right now? You died on the job. A lot of you listen while you're working, while you're commuting, while you're driving for your job. What would happen right now if you died? Or if you got severely injured on the job? What would you do? What would your family do? If you don't have an answer, that's a problem, because you're leaving them to pick up the pieces. I had Nate Bolton in here. He's an Iowa workers' rights attorney to talk about this very topic. Like, what do you actually do? How should you prepare in advance? He spent 20 minutes with me just giving you resources to tell you what to do, what to plan for, how to act, who to call. And so his number one chunk of advice is just have a plan ahead of time. Deal with the reality. It'll probably never happen, but just have a plan. The whole show's free. It doesn't cost you anything. iowapodcast.com/Nate. iowapodcast.com/Nate. Listen to that interview. It's so much good information. And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.